Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, Andy Hooper, CEO, president, and founding partner of Hart House, discusses the importance of creating a positive employment experience within the restaurant industry. Andy and AJ talk about how the culture of the Hart House brand is centered around pride in serving healthy food and creating a fun and comfortable environment. Throughout the episode, they dive deep into Hart House's approach to employee well-being and its unique offerings that set it apart from traditional QSR brands. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
Andy, thanks for being on the pod. You and I have now been talking for a few months. I'm a huge fan of what you guys are accomplishing at Hart House. You are one of the many companies in this space that are doing really fun, exciting things, particularly on people. So excited to dig into that. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, AJ. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about how you got started. Have you been in restaurants a long time? I know Hart House is a bit of a newer brand. What brought you to this space and got you really interested in this particular project?
Sure. I started in restaurants when I was in high school. I was a dishwasher in a full service restaurant. And as much as I tried to shake that as a potential career path, I found myself right back in it while I was in school. The best way to pay for college was to work in hospitality. I was a valet, the banquet waiter, and ultimately my first role coming out of school was with Burger King, whose global headquarters is in South Florida. I went to school at the University of Miami. And, over the 25 years or so now that I've been in the business, I've had the opportunity of kind of working my way upstream towards the ultimate goal of starting something from the beginning. And one of the things that I witnessed firsthand in that full service kitchen 30 years ago was how weird and messed up the experience for hourly workers is in the restaurant business. And it just felt like the biggest arbitrage, not just financially, but just like morally, to be able to think about how you change the quality of that employment experience for what amounts to be about 10% of America's workforce.
And so how did you end up at Hart House? I know that there's celebrity connections. You guys built the company together. Talk to me a little about that and enlighten the group that may be listening and doesn't have a Hart House near them.
Sure. Yeah. So I joined forces with Kevin and the rest of the investors about a little over 2 years ago now. And Kevin had this idea to really go after a better for you version of the classic comforts of QSR cuisine. He sustained an injury back in 2019, and as part of his recovery, he had a chef incorporating an increasingly larger amount of plant-based proteins into his diet. Anybody who knows Kevin today and kind of sees his public persona, he just turned 45 a couple days ago. He's a real fitness nut. The average 45-year-old man does not look like Kevin does, and that is not an accident. He's pretty intentional about what he fuels his body with and how hard he works out.
And so everybody knows we are talking about Kevin Hart, the actor, the entrepreneur, all of those things, in case that hasn't come through already.
Yeah, and so when Kevin got into this accident and was recovering and getting ready to film again, then COVID hit. And so when sort of filming shut down and live entertainment shut down and he wasn't on tour for comedy anymore, it gave him a real opportunity to take that idea from kind of back of a napkin to real out there in the world. And so Kevin had done a bunch of work himself. He's a direct investor in Hart House. It's his own capital at risk. And so this is very much his thing, which is really exciting. And I think lends a lot of credibility to him as the founder of the business. But he was also very intentional about not wanting to be the mascot and also knowing that he's not an operator. And so that's what brought me into the picture. I've spent my time building and scaling restaurant brands, pizza, burritos, burgers and fries. And, when I met Kevin, I met him backstage at the Staples Center before he went on stage to do his first show of the Reality Check Tour in the spring of 2022. And we talked for 90 minutes before he went on stage about how much synergy there was in reimagining what food could be in this space, and then reimagining what the employment experience could be in the space. And that really, you're going to be better positioned than most to take some swings that the average restaurant companies wouldn't want to or couldn't risk taking, like serving a menu that is 100% plant-based, or starting with a benefits package and an approach to hourly employment that was completely different than what had been done historically. And, we kind of sat with one another and we're like, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Because we've got the competency, the history, the ambition, the money, and the profile to do it. So we're probably have no choice but to do it. It's our responsibility to show people that it's possible.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what about your background or perhaps Kevin's background? Like in those very early conversations, why was there such an emphasis on like the people side, right? Like I think when you start a restaurant, there's of course like the appetite, no pun intended, to have unit growth, to make a lot of money, to feed customers good, healthy food. But I know from and what we're about to learn, all the amazing things you do for employees. Why was that core to you guys?
It had really two primary, like, fundamental reasons for it being there. The first was, when you're Kevin Hart and you have 400 million people following your life across social media channels, and you've got 25 years of work history in the public sphere, there's a really high bar for you starting or doing anything. You're going to attract trial. And so the stakes are really high for delivering an exceptional guest experience. And so, number one, like, because the guest experience never exceeds the employee experience, if you really want a kick-ass guest experience, you've got to pour into your folks from the get-go. And the second piece is, that's just a better way to like live life. If you can afford to provide a great opportunity for the people that work for you, it's just more fun than trying to like milk the last blood out of the stone. And I think one of the things structurally that's so difficult about the paradigm for restaurants today is that it is founded upon this fundamental approach to minimizing the cost of labor. Like, all of the rest of the way in which we eat is so subsidized and has been. And I think for those of you that are listening that are like users and purveyors of third-party delivery, it's a perfect example, if you think about where that is today, about how the economic model just doesn't work when you raise the cost of labor, raise the cost of food, raise the price to the consumer in the same way that it did before. And it's having this sort of reset. And so when Kevin and I thought about, what do we want to be? What do we want to be known for? We want to be known for being a place where the employment experience is great, the food is delicious, and the fact that it happens to be made from plants is kind of a byline instead of the headline.
Yeah, that's incredible. And talk to us a little bit about tactically how you do and live out that message from the employment, treating them properly, making sure that they're taken care of. Because, like candidly, we as restaurateurs, like we know that labor is important. And I think that people talk a lot about culture and driving the mission forward and the importance of your frontline workers. But talk to us a little bit about like how you guys put that in action. Like what programs have you initiated, and what are some things you're really proud of at Hart House?
It started for us with identifying a philosophical approach that was different than what people had done historically. I like to use the analogy of like Moneyball in baseball back in the 90s with Billy Beane.
Right.
He looked at it and said structurally he couldn't build a business that was the Yankees in Oakland. And so he had to take a completely different approach to thinking about, in that case, his human capital and what constituted a winning strategy.
Right.
So I think, number one, you have to start with a completely different paradigm, which is that you can't just go and like build a full service wait staff, let's say, in a QSR restaurant. Like, that just won't work. So you have to say, what are the elements of that amazing service that I want to incorporate here, and how do I ensure structurally that it's going to come across the counter? So
Yeah.
with that philosophy, some of the tactics we did were, number one, we went out and said, we're going to pay a living wage, not based on lip service, but based on the actual math of like, what does it take to rent an apartment in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
And came out of the gate with a base wage that was at the time almost $4 an hour more than the minimum wage in the market, because that's what the math said somebody would need to live off of.
Right.
Then what we said is, from there, we're going to go and stack a series of benefits, not that we think matter based on a slide in a board deck, but that these folks are telling us matter to them. Looking at stats like the percentage of hourly workers who are taking emergency withdrawals from their 401k, and saying, man, that's so high. Rather than giving somebody a 401k, why don't we give them an emergency savings account instead, with a higher rate of return and no taxes and fees to access, so that not if, but when that hourly worker needs access to those emergency savings, he or she or they have opportunity to get to it as quickly as possible with no paperwork, no faxing, no waiting periods, no fees, no tax obligations. It's just right there. And so, we stacked a bunch of these benefits on top of the base wage, and then did the math and said, okay, what is the productivity required in order to deliver a labor percent that still makes sense at these menu pricing? And it's amazing what you do. When you do all that work up front, you have the right philosophy, and then you sit down with your hourly workers and you're like, here's the deal. We are going to give you all of this up front. The only thing we need from you in exchange is that the bar for performance and expectations is here instead of here. If you can't meet it, you can't be here, because this is now the major leagues. And I think, that's a little bit of that Moneyball philosophy, where you start to think about things not only like, hey, is AJ a good employee? But when AJ and Andy are on shift together, do they put up more W's than they take L's? And that starts to let you think about paying each of those people more, because 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah, love it. And I love the concept of the emergency savings account. Do you have any like early success stories with that? And can you talk, as much as you feel comfortable doing so, kind of talk like tactically how you set that up? And some of the
Sure.
things, if somebody's listening and they're like, hey, that's a good idea, I'm thinking about implementing that business, like who do you go to like figure that out? And like how do you put that into motion for somebody that's never done it before?
Yeah. So number one, there are several different folks in the space who provide this solution.
Okay.
We partnered with an organization called Sunny Day Fund.
Mm.
The way that it works is that this is a bank account owned by the employee, not owned by the company, not owned by a bank, but it's like their account. And much the same way that you defer some of your income into a 401k automatically through payroll deduction, in this case, you move money through payroll deduction into your own savings account. So think about this in the same way that like you get your direct deposit into a checking account, and then you set up a rule that automatically puts it into a savings account.
Yeah.
The reason it's managed by a third party and not the bank is that the company sets the APY, the yield, on that savings amount. So what we do is say, hey, instead of getting 2%, 3%, 4% interest on this, we'll give you 20% interest on it as an incentive for you to save, so that you are building up that safety net, so that if you encounter some sort of financial stressor in your life, your option isn't to quit your job with Hart House to go get another job so that you can like double up paychecks in a 2-week period. We want you to have that cushion so that you're not worried about if you need to replace the tires or deal with an urgent care visit for your daughter. And so the mechanics are quite simple. You own the account. The payroll automation is set up. You request the withdrawal when you need the money out, and you take it accordingly. What we found from a results perspective is that the retention for folks that are enrolled in that program at Hart House is 2 times as good as the retention for those that are not enrolled. The overall retention of our team is about 5 times as good as the industry average. Last year, we averaged 58% team turnover in the restaurant compared to, say, Chipotle's 193% in the last quarter.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, with the emergency savings account, any like early takeaways of like where people are using most of that money? Is it truly like the tires? Is it medical bills? Like where are you practically seeing it deployed for the frontline workers?
Yeah, I mean, so the nice part for the employee is we don't have the visibility to how they're using the funds.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of like employer overlord
Yeah.
moment where
Yeah.
we're like doing that. But anecdotally, what we know is that they're being used for all of the things that these are being used for today. Somebody's lease comes up, they need a security deposit for the new apartment before moving out of the old one. They can't float that $900 difference. This helps them come up with a portion of that. And then when they get their deposit back from their initial landlord, it sort of replenishes their savings
Yeah.
accordingly. Or
Yeah.
they've got an unexpected expense where they got sick and went to the urgent care and it turned out they needed an x-ray and that bill comes and they owe $180. Now they're not going to collections for that $180.
Yeah.
They're just covering it.
Yeah. Is there any other, because it's a great program. I love it. I wish we covered it in the book. So maybe for book 2, we'll put it in there for a good
Sounds
case
good.
study of how it can
Yeah.
impact turnover. So more, additional money, better than minimum wage, emergency savings account. Now, talk to me a little bit about the culture, right? And I've never been inside of a Hart House. We don't have them yet in Charleston, South Carolina. Hopefully we can change that as you guys scale. But I walk into a restaurant, what do I feel? Like, what's the culture within the 4 walls?
Yeah. We wanted to take a page from what people express as sort of the best of what QSR has always been historically. So when you walk in, you're going to feel like a level of warmth to the space that says, I'm cool hanging here for a bit. Like the fixtures and the finishes look like somebody did it on purpose and not by accident. The restaurant is designed for scale, but also designed for intimacy at scale. The thing that you're going to feel most importantly is that like the vibe starts with the music when you walk up to the restaurant from the outside, and it's this mix of like 70s funk and like the foundations of hip hop and like the beats that are sampled in today's music.
Yeah.
So it's familiar enough for you, but you don't get lost in it like it's a top 40 soundtrack managed by like one of the music companies that's piping it through your speakers. And
Right.
we get a ton of comments on music because it sets them up in this like kind of nostalgic point of view where it feels recognizable, ties back to your childhood, kind of plays on the kid at heart, pun intended, aspect of doing the QSR move. And then when you come in, you see a familiar menu. It's burgers, it's chicken sandwiches, it's fries, tots, shakes, very simple, streamlined. And that's part of the culture too. We're not trying to overwhelm people with choice. We're not trying to be everything to everyone. This is your indulgent fast food experience, but nothing about it down to the service, which is sort of derived from that Ritz-Carlton my pleasure approach, but with our own words, is designed to create this moment where people are like, wow, this is like the best of QSR. And the best part, about half the people don't know what they're eating is vegan food.
Right.
And so at the end of it all, they have it and then they feel better because it's a plant-based diet. And I can't even begin to tell folks that how important to the culture that is, that not only can you serve this indulgent meal, but as the purveyor of that, you can feel like you're actually doing good for somebody instead of just driving poor health outcomes for somebody. And I think that is reflected in the culture of the employment experience too, where now as an employee, you can kind of be proud of what you're serving. Yes, it's simple. Yes, it's QSR. Yes, it's a burger and fries, but you know what you're doing for somebody is actually much, much better for them than what they would have done if they had gone across the street.
Yeah, and what's so interesting as I look at like recruiting and retention for employees as it relates to branding and building that vibe is there's direct correlation kind of to the coolness and the comfort of inside the restaurant and your ability to recruit people in, right? So I kind of see
100%.
Hart House and a lot of emerging franchisees that are building, I think, very Gen Z, millennial, and even older generations, but like just a cool place to be versus a traditional QSR. I'm not going to name any brands, but like you go in and it's like not that fun, not that exciting. White walls, dirty seats, like all these things. And now, now, especially in a tight labor market, workers decide where they want to spend their time, right? And when there's a cool brand like Hart House with, celebrity involvement, social media buzz, cool music, good food, I'm sure that lends itself in the recruitment process where you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel of some brands and you can be a little bit more selective. Is that
Sure.
correct based on your experience? And if so, how do you plan to scale that beyond just the LA locations where it's kind of like your home base into Omaha and Fayetteville, Arkansas, and cities like Charleston where it might not be as impactful? What are your thoughts around that?
That's where I think, AJ, it's so important to have all of those foundational offerings to employees up front. Like when you have wages and benefits that matter. To me, that's kind of the gatekeeper for people coming in then and saying, can I see myself here? Like, is it worth my time?
Right.
It then allows you to also hold the bar very high. I agree with you. Like, nobody wants to go to work in a place where there's no pride in the actual physical space. And so this is all like a mindset difference between investing in profitable growth or controlling costs. Those two things can have the same outcome on EBITDA percentage, but very different outcomes on EBITDA dollars, because one of them involves growth and the other involves just managing to the bottom of the barrel. And if the philosophy of a restaurant company today is how do I spend as little as possible on labor, then you're going to end up with those kind of narrow outcomes. But
Right.
if it's how do I drive the highest EBITDA dollar amount possible, you're going to make different decisions about investment.
So interesting. So much to digest there, but we are coming up on time. Tell me, if somebody who's listening here, wants to learn more about you, learn more about the brand, what's the best way to do that? How can they get in touch with you or follow your journey?
Yeah, well, I think number one, you can follow us on any of the social media outlets. It's at My Hart House for most of them, at MyHarthouse.
Yep.
And from there, you will find me, you will find Kevin, you will find other members of the team documenting and sharing more about our journey. You can certainly find me and us on LinkedIn too, and you can sort of track the history of many of the programs and investments that we've made in our team. And of course, if you're in LA, even going through LAX for a layover, you can literally walk from the terminal at LAX to our restaurant on Sepulveda Boulevard. It is a 15-minute walk from the Southwest Terminal, the Delta Terminal, or the United Terminal, almost the walk to where the Ubers pick you up. So just another few feet and you're there. And you can experience it for yourself and walk in. And what's funny is we see a lot of people with suitcases who have read about, heard about, want to know more about, find themselves at LAX with enough time to make that hike. And we're happy to host you. And if you see me in there, it'll be on the house.
Love it. No, love that offer. But again, thank you so much for sharing your journey. We're gonna have to do a part 2 because I'm sure we're getting a lot of questions from those listening. But thanks so much, and we'll chat soon.
Appreciate it, AJ. Thank you for the time.